Okay, so which pesto camp are you in? Are you a food processor person or a mortar and pestle person? Until recently, I was solidly in the food processor camp. This video is about how I changed my mind. I don't know if you remember the mortar awakening, but about 5 years ago, all my favorite food people became obsessed with mortar pesto. The idea of making pesto in a mortar seemed as ridiculous to me as writing with a quill. 200 years ago, it made sense. Now we have word processors and food processors. But Kenji Lopez-Alt, Daniel Gritzer, and Alex the French guy said that a mortar pesto was a completely different animal. Some said it was more aromatic. Some said it was creamier. Some said it was both. Unfortunately, it was very difficult for me to test these ideas. I didn't have a mortar at the time, and given the fact that I have tendinitis, I wasn't eager to buy one. Here's the thing with mortars. The little ones don't work. I've tried, and they're completely useless. A good mortar needs to be heavy enough that if you drop it on someone's head, you'd kill them. It also needs to have the right shape and the right material. And that's what I found discouraging. According to Daniel, to achieve that perfect creamy texture, I needed a marble mortar with a wooden pestle that cost more than $200. Well, that just wasn't going to happen. Not only is that a ridiculous price, but this mortar is only good for pesto. It's too smooth for grinding spices. Not that I was grinding any spices, but I just couldn't bring myself to spend this much on a tool that could only make one sauce. What about an affordable granite mortar? Daniel said it worked okay, but produced a pesto that had longer stringy strands of fiber from the basil leaves and required more work. That did not sound encouraging. The only reason for me to get a mortar was to produce pesto that was transcendent. So I dismissed the granite mortar as not worth the bother. But a few months ago, I bought just such a mortar to use for a Thai dish and was surprised at how easy it was to use. Yes, it's ridiculously heavy, but unlike a food processor, it works for small quantities and is easy to wash. Compared to a ceramic mortar that I threw away years ago, this one worked so efficiently that my wrist didn't bother me, or at least not too much. Then summer came around and I thought, why don't I try making pesto? The texture difference became obvious very quickly. I could turn the garlic, pine nuts, and basil into a paste without any oil. In a processor, I'd get a fine mince, but it wouldn't be creamy. Okay, let's continue and see how the final texture turns out. This is parmesan shaved with a vegetable peeler. Pecorino sourdough would be a more traditional choice, but I like using ingredients that I have on hand. I like adding a bit of lemon juice to my pesto because a sauce with no acidity just doesn't taste right to me. It's possible that if you use a different cheese, you wouldn't need it. Note how this already looks like pesto, and we haven't even added the oil yet. It typically takes a lot of oil to get a food processor pesto to feel like a sauce. This makes it a tad greasy and spicy. You know how olive oil leaves a slight burning sensation in the back of your throat? Nothing terrible, but it's not exactly a sweet, mellow, creamy sauce. With a mortar, it's amazing how little oil I need. Isn't this lovely? In goes the butter, and we are almost there. I believe that everything is better with butter, even a pesto that's already creamy. Is this authentic? Yes, people in Liguria use butter in their pesto. Now about salt. I was adding little pinches of salt all along, not only for the taste, but also to help with abrasion. The roughness of salt crystals helps break down all the ingredients. This is a great application for some coarse salt like molten sea salt, but diamond crystal kosher would be just fine. I can only compare the creaminess of this sauce to guacamole. This is indeed a very luxurious texture. Although I can't reproduce this in a food processor, I can get close by using butter. Butter helps the sauce emulsify and thicken. But there is no question that the Mortar pesto has a superior texture. If you want to see my processor version, the link is below. Smell is hard to quantify. Technically, you are releasing more aromatic compounds into the air when you use the mortar. Why? Because you break more cell walls by pounding versus cutting the basil. But does this make a difference to the eating experience? I don't think so. A few years ago, before I had a mortar, I set up the following experiment. I put a bunch of basil into a Ziploc bag and pounded it with a meat tenderizer. When I opened the Ziploc bag, it was very aromatic. I put this basil into a food processor and turned it into pesto. Did it smell more than my regular pesto? Not that I've noticed. Here's my best guess as to why a mortar pesto is considered more aromatic. The person pounding the basil in the mortar will smell it more than a person using a food processor. But aromatic compounds are very volatile. They're also very difficult to quantify. Our brains are good at detecting a sudden change in smell, but get acclimated very quickly. Suppose you get a bouquet of roses on 2 different days. One day this bouquet will have a half dozen roses, and another day it will have a dozen roses. Will doubling the number of roses double your aromatic experience? Not really. You'll notice a sudden presence of the rose smell when you get close to the bouquet, but if you stay close for several minutes, it will seem less and less aromatic. With smells, it's the change we notice the most, not the quantity. Once all ingredients were prepped, it took me 10 minutes to make pesto in a mortar versus 2 minutes to make it in a food processor. And in a mortar, I could only make a little batch. It's definitely longer, but a mortar is easier to wash and takes less room to dry. So you win some, you lose some. Since I'm not a frequent mortar user, I bought one with a 2-cup capacity. This makes a relatively small batch. Making a bigger batch might not take much longer, but requires a bigger mortar. The Sophie Chef mortar comes in a 5-cup capacity too, but that will make it even heavier. In my opinion, the mortar pesto makes the biggest difference in pasta dishes, like homemade trophia, which I'll make in the next video. The batch I can make in a 2-cup mortar would be sufficient for about 4 portions of pasta, which is all I can see myself making. If I want pesto for sandwiches, I don't think I'll go through the trouble of using a mortar. Food processor pesto is still delicious and still worth making, especially with my butter trick. Here are more thought-provoking culinary videos for you to check out, and if you are ever in the Boston area, maybe I'll see you in one of my classes.